So what's exciting about these Communities Create projects is that we're wanting to really bring people together in this time where we're all apart.
Be part of a time capsule of life during the pandemic through creative outputs. Hi everybody, I'm Ramona Pringle. I am the Director of the Creative Innovation Studio at FCAT at Ryerson University. Welcome to Communities Create. Hi to the familiar faces that have been in previous sessions with us from the very beginning. This has been a while now. Hi to new people who are joining us for the first time, whether you're part of the TIFF community, whether you are part of the RTA community at Ryerson, whether you're streaming on CBC Arts. It's our second week streaming on CBC, which is very exciting. A little bit of background for people who are new. The goal of Communities Create is to support independent members of the creative community and to use creativity to unite Canadians and help people express how they're feeling in the time of pandemic and uncertainty, certainly when words don't seem to be enough. And we have been through so much. You know, we started this over 2 months ago now, which was a very different time in terms of the pandemic. And yet I think when we look at headlines, we see that the anxiety in that way certainly hasn't gone away. Now there's concerns about the economy. We've seen so much going on in terms of Black Lives Matter and protests that have been going on. And so there's certainly a lot for people to be conveying and be expressing, and having this space for us to come together and work through what we're thinking and what we're feeling in these different creative ways has really been an incredible piece of every single week. We are providing micro grants to independent artists to lead these interactive sessions through a wonderful network of partners. That's where this week RTA, the RTA School of Media at Ryerson University, and TIFF come in as our wonderful partners presenting this session. Today's workshop is on descriptive writing for the screen with David Brock. And in this workshop, we're going to be looking at story development with an emphasis on visual or multisensory storytelling, where individuals, that's you, will learn some basic tools for writing for the screen. I'm going to just go quickly. I don't want to take too much time before we jump right in, but I'm going to go over some ground rules so that everyone has the best possible experience, because people are participating in multiple ways right now. There's some of you who are in the Zoom call, right in the live interactive space. Some of you are streaming on communitiescreate.ca, and some of you are watching the live stream on cbc.ca. Some ground rules are: try the exercises yourself. More than anything else, this is my suggestion. There's something so wonderful about doing these creative activities in real time with other people. It does create this sense of digital space, even though we are all disconnected in our different spaces. I want to quickly say hi to everyone who's watching on the various live streams, and I hope you will participate along with the people who are inside of the session. So introduce yourself, play along, ask questions. You can use the Communities Create hashtag on Twitter, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. We'll keep an eye on what's there as well. For those of you who are in the session right now, hello, good morning, good afternoon. My advice is pin the Communities Create video. Now, depending on how many people are in the session, sometimes you need to scroll over to find that thumbnail, but if you find the Communities Create thumbnail in the top right corner, there's 3 little dots. You want to select those and you'll be able to pin that video. That way you'll be able to see any instructions, any on-screen graphics, always see who's talking and who's leading the session. The next thing is to use the chat function to comment and ask questions. Your microphone will be muted. The moderators who are in this session will unmute you if you have a question to ask, and any audio will be recorded and archived. Last but not least, your video, if you're inside of this session, is controlled by you. It's viewable by other participants if it's on, but it's not being recorded. So I suggest leaving it on. There's something really nice about being able to see the other faces of people who are going through this, paying attention, practicing, feeling a little bit challenged, feeling a little bit inspired, but it's totally up to you. There are a bunch of people on this call. We've got David Brock, who's leading today's session, Michael Coutanche from the RTA School of Media, Hoda Ali from TIFF, our community engagement and tech team, and Diana Breacher, who leads our mental well-being team. And one of the reasons we're doing this, as I mentioned, is to give people a creative outlet for their emotions. So now I'm going to ask Diana to just say a few moments about, or a few things about her role in these sessions.
Thank you, Ramona. Hello, everyone. The reason why I'm here and why I'm here with two of our PhD students, Rachel and Amy, is we want to be able to provide support if for whatever reason you get triggered from these workshops. It doesn't happen very often, but if it does happen, if you're feeling that your emotions are really spilling over and you think it would be helpful to talk with someone about it briefly, make a note of that in the chat. Amy, Rachel, and I will be monitoring and reaching out to you. We also, at the end of the session, for about 15 or 20 minutes or so, after the recording is over, we're available to do a debrief. And we stick around and we, if you think it would be helpful in any way to talk about what came up for you in the session, we're available. So I want to just wish you well, and I'm really excited about this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Now, Michael Coutanche, if you could say a few words. It's great that RTA, the RTA School of Media, is participating today and that you could help sponsor this session with TIFF on screenwriting. A few words from you, please.
Great, thanks, Ramona, and thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this. It's really exciting, and the RTA School of Media has a long history in creating writing courses and helping writers not only get their stories out, but also convey the emotions that they want to get out, which I think is particularly topical for today's session and this whole initiative in all different forms and different platforms too. I mean, our goal is really to help writers access that voice within them, to design their stories in multiple platforms, legacy and going forward. And speaking of design, I'm really excited to say that it's not confirmed yet, but we've been developing an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts, in script writing and story design, which, cross my fingers, is hopefully going to start accepting students in fall 2021. It's a 2-year program, and it will cover stage, screen, and other platforms. And the other platforms is the big part of it, right? We're going to be presenting courses and interactions with writers and faculty and industry that will allow us to be nimble, will allow us to work in the industry for many, many years and tell stories in a bunch of different platforms going forward. So that's exciting news, and I'm really glad to be a part of this. I want to introduce now Hoda Ali. She is the Community Initiatives Coordinator at TIFF.
Thank you for that introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and participating. So my name is Hoda Ali, and I work at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, with the Community Initiatives team, and particularly the Mental Health Outreach team. So our Community Initiatives team and Mental Health Outreach team is dedicated to increasing access to film through programming and facilitating over 100 events each year in hospitals and community spaces. We identify and work with organizations that serve individuals that may not have opportunities to access film experiences due to inequalities and barriers. We amplify historically underrepresented voices and create inclusive spaces for participants who self-identify as living with mental health and give them opportunities to connect with peers through film and film craft. So we're really excited to participate today. I wanted to introduce David James Brock, who will be facilitating today. He is a playwright, poet, librarist whose plays and operas have been performed in cities across Canada, the US, and the UK. We had the opportunity to work with David last year in a summer drop-in workshop series at TIFF called Make Well, and we're really excited to be working with him again today and the Communities Create initiative. So I'm really excited to participate. So I'll hand it off to David.
Thanks. Thank you, Hoda. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here today. We're going to look at something that whether you want to write screen or fiction, or whether you're writing anything, basically we're going to focus on film today, obviously, but we're really going to look at this idea of writing narrative description. Okay, so what's narrative description in a screenplay? It's the action, it's what people are doing, and it's the setting, it's where people are doing it. And hopefully by the end of the day, again, it's this idea that no matter what genre you're writing in, writers notice things, and perhaps we've been in the same room for a while, or the same couple of rooms for a while. And so we've started to notice things differently in our surroundings. So again, the idea, I think Ramona was saying off the top, that things have changed in the last couple months. So maybe just with today's theme of how are you feeling, we can also think about how are you feeling differently about the spaces that you're in, and maybe the spaces that you're looking forward to going to after this. So, so the focus is going to be writing narrative description and really looking at the five senses. All right. So I'm just going to move over here. Thank you. So again, I'm just going to, so if I can see the speaker view. Okay. So again, the action in a screenplay is essentially all that is the stuff that isn't the dialogue or the transitions, basically. So it's what the camera would see. It's what you want an audience to see. And so on the example, if we could get an example of the narrative description, that one there. So what hopefully everyone's going to leave with today, or a bit of a takeaway, is something that looks very much like this. And then ultimately the dialogue is going to be, that you might write subsequently would be affected by this. But today we're really going to look at the places your characters are in, or the places you're in. And we're going to really sort of try and get every sense down in a scene so that your viewer or your reader knows exactly where they are, even when they are, and even the temperature. So we're going to really look at all the senses that can be around. So that slide will come back later on, but I want to look at just the idea of what setting is. So setting is the environment where your story is going to take place. As we all know, settings affect how people speak, how they act, what they say, how they move, how they don't move. So again, we're not going to just look at setting as the thing you need to have, but ultimately thinking about it as a way of affecting the characters that inhabit your world. It can also be when your stories take place, so historical or social circumstances. So our job as writers and as screenwriters particularly is to make the sensory experience of our setting clear. You might hear this sometimes called world building. So today we're just going to start building some worlds. Again, in the time we have, we're going to do an internal setting, and we're going to look at maybe an external setting. So this demands that we're really thinking about the five senses, and I think probably we are familiar with those, but just as a quick review, the things I want you to really think about today are the sights, the smells, the textures or touch, the sounds, and even, this is going to be the hard one, but we can go there sometimes, the taste of a particular setting. So as a way of just sort of breaking the ice and getting you thinking, I want you to try right now. We're going to go activity one, just playing off the theme, how you're feeling right now. I want you to think about the space you're in right now. So again, not necessarily the feelings of it, but the sensory experience of it, which really are the things that are affecting the feelings and the things you say and the way you move. So activity one, I want you to, and we'll go really, just so we're not sort of thinking that it has to be this grand literary thing at the moment, we'll just really say, number one, in the room you're in, what do you see? And this will be, so we're not editing each other, or we're not sort of letting that inner editor come in. We'll say 60 seconds. And I'm going to start the time now, 60 seconds. So what do you see in your room? In the space you're in, not even the room you're in, just wherever you are. Oh, and you certainly can, I like that it's in the chat. You can certainly keep that private for now, but that's beautiful. Thank you, Ramona. You don't have to type in the chat yet. All right, that's 60 on that one. The next thing, 60 seconds. What smells do you notice in the space you're in right now? We'll start now. Okay, and that's 60 seconds for the smells of the space. Next question, I know you're not maybe feeling everything in the room, but what materials are in the room? And even if you're not touching them at the moment, how could you describe the texture of that? So I'll give you an example. For mine, I've been leaning on my glass top desk for the first 15 minutes of this, and I'm feeling sort of a stickiness on my arm on the glass. So that's the type of thing that we're looking for here. Not just sort of saying there's glass in the room, but a sort of description of that glass or any of the couple of materials you can immediately access. So we'll go 60 seconds now. Okay, and that's 60 on that one. Perhaps predictably, we're going to any sounds you'd hear in a room. So some of us have headphones in, so you might need to pop it out, or maybe that's the sound you're hearing. So my voice probably, that gentle music, which is very nice, very good for writing. But any other sounds you hear in your space. And we'll go another minute on that. Okay, and that's 60 on that. Seems to go faster as they maybe get more difficult. And then finally, this one's the hard one, but we're gonna try it anyway, just to sort of get the mind warmed up. So any taste. So I realize maybe we're not eating right now, but for example, I have this water and there's like a dull lemon to it. So something like, you know, that counts. So any taste that you even remember through the day. Again, it's a little harder to do in screenwriting, but we're going to take a shot anyway because it's evoking all 5 senses. So here we go, 60 seconds. Okay, great. So now what I would like to invite everyone to do is, there we go, there's the sound, is if you feel comfortable, I invite you to share sort of the 3 most stark images that came out of that for you. And again, it doesn't need to be 3 sights, 3 sounds. And also this keeps us from maybe describing our entire apartments to somebody. We don't necessarily need to do that. What we really want to do is sort of come up with the 3 most sort of maybe the most surprising, maybe the most memorable, the most vivid images to you from that exercise. And I realize we went quickly, but so you can share 1, 2, or 3, and let's pop that in the chat if you're comfortable to do that. If not, no worries. Just to get a sense, just so we can see all of those sort of sensory experiences collected. So feel free to do that now, whenever you'd like, and we'll just see what we get. I'll do mine too. These are great. So, they're going fast now. Beautiful. The whirring of the fan. I had something very similar. A cat meowing. That's great. Thank you, Evelyn. Cyberpilot. A bookcase brimming with books. I can see that. That's really vivid. The clock ticking. The AC rumbling. Lou, that's wonderful. Susie. A playfully cluttered space, organization that could be understood by the owner of a said mess. That's beautiful. That's a screenplay direction for sure. These are great. These are great. Wonderful. Okay. So these types of things that everyone's putting in the chat here, these are our inspiration today. These are the things that we're going to write into our screenplay. We're just going to move the environment in a second. Now, what I want to show is a clip from a movie. Some of you may have seen it, Interstellar. And I want to sort of look at a short clip of that and up against the script. So you can see how the script actually translates into the video. And again, we're not going to obviously get to the filming of it, but I want you to really see how important this sensory description on the page is to what the finished product ends up being. So again, we'll do a little inspiration on that, and then we will try another activity where we move our location from the internal. But all of these internal, these images, very stark. These are the exact type of writing that we're going to want to practice in the next activity as well. So if we could get the inspiration clip up with the script, that would be awesome.
This way. About 200 meters.
Gravity's punishing.
Been floating through space too long?
130% Earth gravity.
There's nothing here.
Should be right here.
If there's signals coming from here. For beacon.
Wreckage. Where's the rest?
Towards the mountains!
Those aren't mountains. They're waves.
Oh shit. Oh shit.
That one's moving away from us.
We need the recorder.
Brand Doyle, back to the Ranger now.
We're not leaving without her data.
Get back here now. No, we do not have time. The second wave is coming. We're in the middle of a swell. Get your ass back to the Ranger now!
Great. Thank you. During that, a great question came up, which I think will be helpful for activity 2. But you could see how those images lined up to the script, right? So that starts on the page. Francis asked a great question. If two screenwriters observe their setting in a different manner, how do both screenwriters adapt and agree what they observe, and how do they agree what senses to utilize in your work? You don't need to agree. The beauty of you being the writer is this is your vision, your world. So the world you're building means you use the senses and you use the details of the senses you want to use. All right. So, I mean, in an exercise like this, I'm asking you, I'm saying, think of taste, but certainly there'll be a lot of screenwriters for whom that's not necessarily part of the story they're telling. So again, that sort of idea of an agreement, if you're talking about the agreement between scriptwriter and director, that often takes a conversation and that takes an edit. I can address that a bit more when we, if there's any time in the wrap up for sure. So this is what we're going to do now. The idea of how you're feeling was just getting a sense of how you're feeling in the room you're in. And now I want you to sort of think about, you know, for the overwhelming majority of us, we spend a lot of time in a single location. I've spent most of my time in the space you're seeing now over the past few months, certainly more time than I've spent at any other point in living here. So I want you to think about a time when maybe things will be a bit freer. Now that means that, again, that can mean anything. That can mean something different to every writer. So I want you to think about a time when maybe you'll be able to do something that you haven't necessarily been able to do the last little while. Or maybe you've loved this and that's fine too. You can choose the exact place you're in and that'll work for this exercise too. So I want you to think about a time when you'll be a bit more able to go somewhere where you haven't been able to go. And I want you to think about where that place is. And just write it down on your piece of paper or your computer or whatever. So where do you really want to go? We're going to try and keep this a little positive, a little green field here, blue skies. So write that place down by name. And now we're going to do pretty much the same thing. You may have not been there or you may have been there. That's either way works. So now we're going to do a very similar exercise that we just did in activity 1 for that place. Okay, so we're going to either imagine it or remember that place, depending on if you've been there before. So we're going to think of every sensory detail you can for this imagined location. And again, we don't necessarily need to put this in the chat. You can sort of keep this on your page for now. The goal here is we're going to make the location real. No detail is too small. And in fact, the more specific, the better. Looking at these really vivid descriptions in the chat, things like the sound. Vanessa S is, I can hear the sound of a spouse counting laundry change. That's really vivid and really powerful and very specific. Great, like that type of detail is exactly what we're going for here. Okay, so same exercise as activity 1 with this imagined place. So what sights do you see? What smells are present? What textures and materials are present? What do they feel like to touch? Do you hear any sounds? And again, the all difficult taste. So either actively, like there's something there you might want to eat, or passively, like the taste of the air. And that can even include a word like neutral, right? So for activity 2, same as activity 1, give it a shot with your, where are you going to go after this? And I'll give, we have a little bit of time for this. So let's go 5 minutes and then a check-in and see where we're at after that 5. I think that's probably a pretty good start. That's 5 minutes. So certainly something that you can continue on with, because we're going to adapt that into activity 3. But I don't know if that was difficult for anybody, but sometimes a really good way when you're stuck in a sensory experience of a place that you're imagining is to really think of, put yourself in the place, right? And then looking forward and just describing either what you see or what you experience in front of you or what you imagine of someone experiencing in front of them. And then turn that camera behind you, or then turn that to the left, or turn it to the right, or what's on the ground, what's in the sky. So I don't know if in activity 1 you were having that experience where you experience maybe the floor, or some of you maybe where I saw looking up to the ceiling, or looking left, looking right, that it wasn't just in the field of view. So that's a good way of sort of keeping things moving so that you're not feeling stuck in the, well, there's so much in front of me that I can't count everything. It's really what's important, what's grabbing your attention in front of you, to the left, to the right. And that goes for all the other experienced senses as well. Okay, so again, I invite, just in the interest of time, I really think it's inspiring to see, Francis, you beat us to the punch. I love that. Why not put, if you have a couple sentences that you would like to share of that imagined place, I think that would be beautiful. So feel free again to share in the chat. I think there will be a record of that, which is great. Really great. So we'll keep those going. And then now we're going to bring this all together. So what we need to do as writers is make sure that we're creating settings that maybe aren't, even if they're beautiful settings, sometimes they cause a bit of a conflict. That doesn't mean fighting. It just means, Norma brings this up really well, that it made me feel nostalgic to return there. That's a bit of a, there's that's a happy thing, but it also can be not necessarily, it can be a bit of a bittersweet thing. So again, that's the type of thing that I would want you to think of. What detail might make you feel that way? Now, certainly in Interstellar, the setting was obviously a conflict. We were in the middle of water. There was a giant wave coming. We had all those sort of those things, right? So what I want you to do for this final exercise of sort of bringing it together is I want you to think about how these settings that you're putting into the chat, how they could maybe create some sort of obstacle. Okay. Now, again, there might be the obvious ones like a fence that someone can't get over. For my exercise, I chose Greece, and one of the obstacles is I don't have the language. So that's a sort of, I don't have the fluency in the language. So that might be an issue with communicating via sound. So that's using the senses to really tell a story. So I want you to think about ways where your activity 2 location might provide some sort of obstacle. Again, it doesn't need to be a whole dramatic conflict at the moment, right? So again, think about something like, is there a terrain that's hard to navigate, right? Ocean water, sand, a mountain, a cliff face, a locked door. Is there something about the air quality that is either that could be potentially an obstacle? Certainly in Interstellar, they couldn't just breathe the air on that planet. Is there a sound that could be disruptive? A lot of us are really sensitive to sound, and I'm seeing some real attention to sound in these descriptions here. So that's great. So again, I want you to sort of imagine a very short, like 3 to 6 lines, just to get us started. Active scene in your location where a character is navigating that experience, and it's not easy. All right, there might be some challenges. So again, really just structurally, just to give us this idea that we're writing in screen. Try and put the name of the setting at the top, the scene heading. So, external, a wide open field day, something very, very simple. Where do you imagine What's the name of the location and what do you imagine? Try to write in present tense, like your character in Interstellar. Doyle looks from Brand to Case. Doyle sees the mountain. You don't need to give your character a name. If you want to, that's great. But again, make sure the sensory details are involved in that scene. Certainly sight, sound, and texture. And again, when we get to it, typing it in Courier font or with a capitalized scene heading will give it that look of a piece of screenwriting. So again, it's the idea that your scene could look very much like that example that we showed at the top. Again, I don't know if everyone's working on the same platform. That's okay if not. But again, something very much like the example, if we could get that again, and then we'll go back to the activity 3 prompt. Just get the way it should look, that little example. There, like that. Okay, so the takeaway, your takeaway piece should look a little bit like this. It doesn't need to be as many lines. I realize, you know, that's a lot of writing. That's certainly a lot of writing for me some days. So again, the idea that some of these descriptive things that you're seeing here, beautiful writing, that they are somehow hard to navigate for a writer. And we'll try that for another 5 minutes, and then hopefully leave 5 minutes for maybe a share, a read, you know, on the chat. So I'll start timing 5 minutes now, and then see where we get. I think that's clear. We can put those. Yeah, thank you for putting the activity exercise back up. And that's 5. So maybe you got a few lines out, or that's great. I mean, the idea here is starting scenes. If you're writing a character in a location and that location is not the easiest thing in the world for them, you have a scene from a film, at least an early scene or a middle scene. So with the time we have left, I think the way to do this, if anyone would like to share, if you could put your name, we have time for a few, so we might not be able to get through too many, but if someone would like to read their scene aloud, otherwise you're absolutely can keep putting it in the chat, which is great. These are really great to read. But if anyone would like to volunteer to read out loud, you can put your name in the chat now and we can sort that out and do an unmute. No pressure if not, it's great to see, it's even great to read these. The other thing we can do is perhaps discuss, were there any challenges to that? Because I asked you to write a scene you wanted to go to in activity 2, and then asked you to make it a slight conflict. Were there any challenges there? Oh, we have a volunteer, Evelyn. Evelyn, you can unmute yourself and we can listen. That'd be wonderful.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Sorry, I went on mute and said I can.
Okay. Interior rock climbing gym, day. The walls are punctuated with multicolored rock roots zigzagging to the warehouse. Green, yellow, purple, orange, and brown rocks are all tinged from dirt, sweat, and chalk. Electronic dance music throbs loudly in the center of the room. Climbers group together along the edge. They look up at the climber ascending a boulder. Climber Mia grunts with effort as she swings her left arm around an overhang to the next hold. The climbers below shout encouragement. And that's it.
That is exactly, there was not a moment where I didn't know or we didn't know what we were looking at. The attention to sound with the grunt, the attention to the colors of the rocks, really, really great. And also a problem, like they got to get up the wall. It's beautiful. That's exactly right. And so that's a scene that even, probably 6 lines could be at least, it could be a minute of film and a minute of compelling film. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And Vanessa says, I wondered if I talked too much about how they were feeling instead of what they were seeing around them. Maybe, but the idea is, what are they responding to around them? So a really good way sometimes, if you think you're writing too many feelings, is just have them check in on one of the senses around them and then let that propel them into a feeling. All right, that's great. So again, you might be, but that's okay too. Sometimes feelings are the sort of emotional scaffolding for the sensory world that we're going to build around it. So that's totally okay. Are there any questions before I pass it back to the? There is a takeaway where I ask you to try this again with an internal location, and then maybe again just trying these exercises, the same exercise in a variety of locations. So it can be a place, you could have applied this to the activity 1. You could apply this to another location. The point is, every screenplay is a series of locations and a series of the senses being evoked until people start saying and doing things within those. So again, this exercise is something that you really can duplicate for every scene and every story that you craft, regardless of genre. An internal location, by the way, is inside, basically, right? So you would write EXT for an outside space, a beach, the outside of a building, a city street, and internal, INT, would be inside an office, a school, a car, those types of things. So that's what I mean by internal and external, just indoors, outdoors. That's a really basic working knowledge for that. Any other questions before I pass back? All right, this was excellent. I hope, and thank you for being here, and thank you for hosting this. I hope that this hope, again, you're not going to, no masterpieces are expected in 40 minutes. But I hope this sort of kickstarts you into maybe a new scene that you weren't thinking about, or just maybe it changes the way you relate to the space that you're in now. And again, this idea that our feelings can be, how we're feeling can often be dictated by the sensory experience of the things that surround us. So I hope that's making you maybe observe the world in a little bit of a fuller or a different way, and that maybe that gets into the things you create. So I really appreciate everyone being here today and participating. So thank you very much.
Thank you. What a great session. That was really wonderful. And I know you've encouraged people to try this also with interiors, but we really want to see what people have written, especially as you take a little bit more time in addition to the 40 minutes and you're thinking through what you're writing and polishing a little bit. We'd love to have you use the Communities Create hashtag and share what you've written so that we can add it to this creative time capsule of life during this moment that we are archiving and compiling during this time. David, there's going to be a reading party if people submit them before Friday, correct? Correct? There's going to be a reading party, so if you are...
I once again muted so you wouldn't hear my breathing, so yes, absolutely.
So that means if you're participating, even if you're not in the Zoom call today, but if you've been participating in the live stream, if you write something and want a bit of feedback, want to share it, want to hear what other people have to say, including David, if you can have those submitted earlier in the week, then we'll have that reading party later on in the week. Now I'm going to wrap things up. David, one of the questions I always like to ask before we start the sessions, and we jumped right in today, is a little bit about your own creative practice and especially your thoughts on the role of creativity in crisis.
I mean, that's a good question, because that's changed even for me through the 100 days where we've been doing this, where, to be honest, and I'll be honest, the first couple of weeks I wasn't creating anything. It was just sort of the adjustment, and I think that's completely okay. And then I started doing it just as a way to have stuff to do. And I really think that in these times in the middle of a crisis, there'll be time to reflect on things after, where I think we'll have a bit more of a perspective. I think what I've really come to think about is removing a notion of excellence during a crisis. So the idea that while you're in the middle of something, certainly writing it down, recording it, journaling, point form, post-it notes, however you do that, whatever your process is, and mine is sort of random notes in a notebook, but taking the idea of finished product away and not worrying so much about that, because we're human beings and we don't necessarily have that ability to perfect our feelings on crisis on the first go. Mm-hmm. So I found that the idea of I'm writing a little bit every day and not thinking about what it's going to look like someday, right? So I'm working on a screenplay, I'm working on a play, and the idea is I'm not thinking about them on film or in a theater right now. I'm just thinking about getting the thing down, and when things loosen up a little bit, being able to maybe look at it with a bit of, let's say, not quite clarity, but perspective for whatever that means to everybody else. But the thing that I'm really on is taking away the notion of excellence during creating in crisis. That it's important that you get something down if that's important to you, but it's not important that it's shared, or, I mean, I know I asked everyone to share here, but I find that's helped me continue to write every day, whereas I wasn't in the first couple of weeks.
You know, what's so interesting about that is it's very much, I think, been one of the great successes of Communities Create. From the very first session, these were designed so that there was, they were designed to be interactive, so there was stuff people could be doing within the first 5 minutes, within the first 10 minutes. And it really is that same idea, is let's just do something, let's just make. Yeah. And instead of being overwhelmed by thinking about what the masterpiece is going to be or what that great output is going to be, just to do something is it's just such a wonderful act. And there's something really lovely about doing something all together. So thank you again for your insights and for a really wonderful workshop. Thank you to this week's partners, to the wonderful, wonderful team at the Toronto International Film Festival, at TIFF, and my home school, the RTA School of Media, for supporting this, which was really great. Thank you everyone for joining us. I know that there's been people watching the live stream over on YouTube, on Communities Create, on CBC. That's great. Everyone was so active inside of the session. In fact, if you are watching a live stream, I highly encourage you to try and pre-register for one of the other events so that you can be inside of the session, because then you get to see the chat that's going on. There's all sorts of insider information that you get that way as well. With that in mind, next week's session is on journaling the plague year, and that's presented by the Okanagan Regional Library, which is really exciting, getting outside of Ontario for some other perspectives as well. I'm going to, I'd also like to encourage everyone, yes, join us next week, but there's a growing archive of past sessions, and there's everything from photography to music to improv, lots of writing, lots of digital storytelling, really anything that you're looking for at this stage, because we've been doing this for a couple of months now, is there, and the sessions are all equally interactive. You jump right in, you get your feet wet. So I highly encourage you to check some of those out. And now, I'm going to hand it over to Diana and our mental health team for a debrief, for a conversation. We do have resources on communitiescreate.ca on the website there around well-being and crisis resources. So bye to everyone who's leaving now. Thank you for participating. Whatever stream you're on, wherever you're participating with us, I hope that you'll come back next week. And I'm going to take a moment, and then it's over to you, Diana. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.